So now we turn to the Media Rumble Roundtable. We've assembled a collection of media pundits to join me to opine on the news of the day. Just a note here, Kevin Williamson from National Review was scheduled to be here, but unfortunately he had a last-minute travel issue. So he won't be a part of this panel, but he will be joining me virtually for a breakout session later this afternoon. Our first panelist, let me get right to the panelists, is the host of Black and Right, heard each Saturday afternoon from 1 to 3 on our airwaves on AM 560. Please welcome John Anthony. Next, he's the host of the Chris Stigall. I always want to say Stiegel. Chris Stigall show on AM 990 in Philly, so we got a lot to talk about with respect to what's going on in Philly. And KCMO in Kansas City, please welcome Chris Stigall. Lastly, he's the host of the Liberty Hour, heard each Sunday evening from 7 to 9 p.m. on 560answer.com. He's also the proprietor of the Elmhurst Cigar House. You may know him as Sean from Elmwood Park. Please welcome Sean Thompson. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. So let's start with Chris Stigall and Philadelphia. And
do we have to?
Yes, well, not that we haven't had our share of what you're experiencing in Philadelphia and Chicago, but give us the latest from a terrible week in Philadelphia with the rioting and looting and just where things stand.
Well, no one is talking about this, and I find it probably not terribly shocking that you don't know this, maybe. The National Guard is in Philadelphia, which is, yes, that's good. What's not so promising is that they're stationed there until November 9th. So what does that mean?
You got problems.
Well, you don't have problems until after the election, right?
I mean, I don't know what that says to you, but that says to me they anticipate there's going to be more problems than just the current violence that we see. Pennsylvania.
Also, too, I mean, just to add to that, also, too, it says to me what we've seen. I mean, there were more than 200 arrests the last time I checked, and the individual I heard talking about the prosecution side of the law and order issue was the U.S. attorney in Philadelphia. It wasn't the district attorney, Larry Krasner, and so again, we know from Kim Foxx in Chicago and Cook County what it's like to have a George Soros-funded prosecutor. But for those not familiar with Philadelphia, talk a little bit about that piece of it as well.
Yeah, exactly the same as your Kim Foxx, just less attractive, I guess. I don't know what else to say.
Each their own.
Yeah, his name is Larry Krasner, and he's a nightmare. I mean, this is a guy that kind of openly... Well, I'll tell you this. When an officer was recently assassinated just a month ago, Larry Krasner, the DA, shows up at the hospital, and the officers forbid him from walking into the hospital to see the officer and his family.
Wow.
So that tells you where things stand in Philadelphia with the police and the DA. It's a disaster. It's a real nightmare. He is sincerely, genuinely an enemy of the people. He's sincerely a genuine enemy of peace and law and order. I think everyone understands it. You probably read, I don't even know who he thinks he is. He said something to the president in trying to monitor our satellite election offices in Philadelphia. Said if the president tries to send people in to monitor these, he'll have something waiting for him.
Oh boy, that's a threat.
Again, I don't know how you guys want to interpret these things. These are real words that were said by a public official in Philadelphia. So what does that mean? I don't know. But if there's any way in the world you guys can get it done here in Wisconsin and not need Pennsylvania on Tuesday, that would be great, is all I'm here to tell you.
Well, so what do you think the impact is on the violence in Philadelphia this week on the outcome in Pennsylvania?
Well, it's I guess there are two minds. Some would say that it's a reminder at the 11th hour that, oh, this is what happens when Democrats run things. I hope that's true. I don't know how much more, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is no different than you guys in Illinois. I mean, we're run by an equally terrible reprobate. He's just thinner.
Maybe not as wealthy.
And we have a Secretary of Health. Well, I'll just leave it alone.
She makes Allison Awardy look attractive.
Right.
Yeah.
She has a lot in common with Governor Pritzker's brother, if that's...
Really?
Cousin. Pritzker's
Cousin?
cousin. Yes. Jim to Jennifer, same thing in
The
Pennsylvania.
transvestite.
There you go.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I don't know. When you're curious about your gender, I don't know how great I feel about that being in charge of our health policy in Pennsylvania. But okay, I'll move beyond that. My point is, the people of Pennsylvania are being crushed like you guys in Illinois are being crushed. Businesses, small businesses, school kids are still sitting around. My three are sitting around computers around our table. I'm blessed that I have a stay-at-home wife and mother who is a former school teacher, so she can at least guide my kids to a degree, but I would be less than honest with you if I didn't say I see my kids withering on the vine along with all of their friends. And my wife's friends call and cry to my wife about how despondent they are. Restaurants are closing all over the Philadelphia area and throughout Pennsylvania. So I don't know what riots do other than remind people in the midst of all this despair and sadness that the violence on top of it, something's really wrong, and I don't believe people assign it to Donald Trump. Yeah. So my gut is, I hate saying it, but my gut is it benefits the president.
Before we continue, I just want to get by show of hands, who has the better approximation of the Jack Dorsey beard? Is it Chris or is it John Anthony? I don't know.
Oh, he's much more handsome.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
So to whoever wants to jump in, Sean or John, what about law and order as part of the closing argument for President Trump in this weekend's rallies into Monday, and he's going to be in Kenosha on Monday again. This being, what he tries to impress upon people as the choice they're making on Tuesday.
Well, for me, it's been obvious from the get-go that, in my opinion, what you're seeing is the Democrat base and acting, and that's what they represent to me. When I look at these protesters, when I look at the looters, I don't see people with a mission. I see people taking advantage of a situation. Yeah. And what that represents to me is if you want that to stop, it's not going to stop in these Democrat-run hubs. In fact, what they've told the police to do is to sit back and let it happen. Right? So if you want that to stop, you need to make sure that from Mount High doesn't share or sympathize with that belief. So to me, it's like one giant ad, to Chris's point. It's like one giant ad for Donald Trump. There's no question for it. The question I have is, are enough people smart enough to see it? Yeah. We're from, a lot of us are from Illinois and Philadelphia. We're surrounded by intellectually corrupt people and willfully ignorant people. That's the part that we can't really get our finger on. It's hard to quantify how many people are lured by the free cheese promises of utopia, right? So that's what has me nervous. I'm optimistic. I think more people see what is happening and say, I want this to stop, and the only way it's going to stop is if we have somebody like Donald Trump in, or if we have a different philosophy of what looting and intimidation by a mob is. We got a lot riding, though. We got 4 days, and it's going to be one way or the other. I think what's on the ballot is American suicide versus American sustaining its trajectory. I think it's that serious.
And John, somebody with law enforcement background as well, but think about urban centers and their impact on the suburbs, right? In the suburbs of Chicago, people pay attention to what's going on in the city, and it impacts how they think about the world, and it impacts their vote. So particularly among Black Americans, and again, the Gallup poll that finds 80% of Black Americans want the same level or more police than they currently enjoy around the country. Yes. So how do you see Philadelphia and everything that's happened from the summer forward impacting Tuesday?
Dan, thank you. I'll sum it up like this. My mother has never voted for a Republican in her entire life.
What about you?
Oh, yeah.
She voted for you.
Well, she couldn't vote for me.
Oh.
She wasn't in the same district.
Okay.
She wasn't in the same district when I served in the House. But she voted for Donald Trump and Mark Kern. First time ever voting for a Republican. And I think one of the things that drove that was what she was seeing on the nightly news. And I think my mom, she's from Chicago, but she lives in Lansing now. And she doesn't want that out in Lansing. And I think that's the driving force what so many people are watching. And I think it's going to, I think the law and order message is resonating with so many Americans in Black America. And I think that's why you see so many Black Americans fired up, what Obama say? Fired up and ready to go. And they're fired up and they're ready to go vote for Trump.
You know, it's interesting. There was a gentleman from Flint, Michigan, Maurice Davis, who's on the city council in Flint, Michigan. And this was the day that Biden and Trump had their competing rallies in Florida, so this got overshadowed. But this was on Wednesday. Maurice Davis, lifelong Democrat, 64 years old, and he got up at a Trump rally, said, I voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. I've been a Democrat all my life. I'm still a Democrat. But I'm from Flint, Michigan, and Flint, Michigan is poor, and we're struggling. And particularly under COVID-19, plus the destruction of cities and suburban areas, he's like, you know, we can't take the pounding that has been given sanction to by Democrats. And that's how he described why he's voting for Trump. And I just wonder if there is, you know, all of this sort of social undesirability quotient in the polling. I wonder if it's not. I wonder if it's more specific than it is general. In other words, more specific to lower income communities, disproportionate minority who are taking a pounding under lockdowns and lawlessness, and we're going to see that increment put Trump over the top.
I agree with you 100%. I think when you look at, and this is the mindset of most blacks. I'm gonna exclude Austin because we're gonna have somebody. If I don't say the city of, I mean the neighborhood of Austin in Chicago, I'll get yelled at. But look on the west side of Chicago. Look on the south side of Chicago. They still look the same since the '68 riots. And I think black people's eyes have finally awakened to the promise of Trump. What the hell do you have to lose? They've lost so much. And I think that's what's driving them. That's what specifically is driving them to the poll. Years and decades of mediocrity from the Democrat Party, and now you have a Republican who's now finally addressing the issues that have plagued these neighborhoods for decades. They haven't had anybody to really address them the way he's doing it.
And is it fair to say, too, it's been important, not just what he's done materially, the First Step Act, and funding historically black colleges, but just as important has been the constant Red Rover, come over.
Come over.
You know, the overtures made.
The acknowledging.
Yes.
You know, the affirmations of what he wants to do, the Platinum Plan. I said in my breakout session, I think it shook black America when Ice Cube came out. All the other ones, 50 Cent and all that, but when Ice Cube, to Raquel mentioned, Ice Cube was a militant. Reminds me, he's basically the black Sean Thompson.
Right. He was Sean Thompson. He didn't make. He made it to the final cut of NWA.
Exactly.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, though. I wonder why. I hate the idea we still are talking about black communities and white communities, and I wonder how long it's going to take. We live in a democratic mafia in Chicago, Illinois. It's 100 years of one philosophy. All it builds and all it creates are ghettos and poverty. Simple. Whether you're black, Mexican, white, it's that simple. So this is a philosophy that has no utopia, although it speaks of it constantly. Promises just this mystical, magical government life, yet what it delivers is ghettos. And that's what we need to focus on and reject that philosophy. I think it's time that after this election, I really want to drop the black community, the Mexican community, the white community. It's about the freedom community versus the tyranny community. It's that simple.
It's an industry.
You know, Dan, if I may, I just wrote a column actually featuring a restaurateur in Philadelphia. His name's Dave McGrogan. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because and the reason I'm reading this is because I actually want to remember what he said. He's a restaurateur in the area who had started popping up social media during these lockdowns in Pennsylvania and the Philadelphia area. Very angry, very upset. I reached out to him and I said, would you come on the show? He wouldn't come on. Finally, last week, he'd had enough and he said, yes, I'll come on. And it was because I suspected as much. He's a flame-throwing leftist, committed liberal, 100% liberal, wanted nothing to do with coming on a show like mine. But finally, he came on, and he shared with me that his 11 restaurants are down to 9, his 800 employees are down to 3, just under 300, and some quotes. Now we have guys that are doing IT as well as kitchen inspections. In a day, people are doing 2 or 3 duties instead of just 1. That's the only way we're going to survive. He said, I should be a blue flag-waving guy going up and down the street singing the praises of our Governor Wolf. But he said, instead I'm probably going to be voting Republican, and so are most of my progressive colleagues. And he said they, the Democrats, have created a giant enemy out of me. I've watched the government come in and destroy my business. They've completely taken away my ability to earn an income. They have completely taken away my freedom to operate my business safely and intellectually. He goes on, but I'll cut to the chase. He said, we have a joke amongst many of my friends that we're the new deplorables.
He ain't black.
So what about that? Let's talk about COVID, because, I mean, if you look at the public opinion surveys, President Trump doesn't get very high marks for his handling of COVID. I mean, in point of fact, the Biden campaign has made the entire campaign on COVID and character, right? And so what do you say to people who call into your show, or call into your shows, plural, or that you just talk to in everyday life, when they say, you know, his handling of COVID is the reason I'm voting for Joe Biden?
You want to go first, Philadelphia?
Right. Yeah, what do I say? It's people that say he's handling COVID better.
His handling of COVID is the reason I'm voting for Biden.
Yeah, I've not had that. I don't know if anybody dare, given the way I scream and yell about it every day. No, it's honestly, I struggle with anybody saying that out loud, frankly. I don't know anybody that's serious that said that to my face, and I'm kind of not kidding. Serious people that are parents or business owners or trying to lead a life, I mean, unless you're just in sheer terror. I mean, and I don't know, perhaps I just happen to be a Christian, proudly so. I don't live in that kind of fear, and I don't understand that kind of fear, but that's my personal relationship with Christ. I don't live that way. That's not to condemn people that are afraid. I don't mean to dismiss, and there are people that should be concerned, I understand, but when I see the sadness, just the sheer crushing sadness and desperation of most people, my kids who can't socialize, my sophomore in high school who loves football like you wouldn't believe and he can't play, restaurateurs and businesses that are closing after the first time just opening this year. I don't know serious people who look at COVID and think, oh, if only we had someone running the government to manage us better. I don't think that's the attitude amongst most people. I could be terribly wrong, but I don't think it is.
Well, I'm just, you know, you just look at where the numbers are and where the numbers are in these swing states, and you say, based on everything that was happening prior to COVID, this should be a walk for re-election, and it clearly is not a walk for re-election. And look, the approval ratings, Wolf is a sort of an exception. Everybody seems to hate that guy.
Yeah.
He's awful.
But Pritzker's approval rating in Illinois is north of 60%.
Yeah.
It is. Tony Evers is not suffering dramatically in terms of his standing among cheeseheads up here, even though he's a lockdown and bust artist too. Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan and others. So that there is something afoot where people, because they're afraid, you're right about that, and otherwise reasonable people. I know some of my friends that are otherwise reasonable people, business people, conservatives, that have been gaslighted by the hyperbole of the left and the public health professionals that get standing and you get pounded on through the mainstream media, amplified through big tech. I mean, there is that cohort out here that is afraid, and they're afraid enough to be saying, maybe it could have been handled better, maybe we need to make a change. That's a real dynamic that's out there.
And that's why he should have never given quarter to it. You can't make friends with tyranny. You cannot make friends with socialism. You can't say, I'm going to give you a little bit of this control, and then I'm going to automatically say, okay, it's time to take it off. Because the fascists, known as the Democrats, like to have that control over us. I wanted Trump to say, I'm not shutting anything down.
Yeah.
And in these 50 little incubators of policies called states, let them do what they want and suffer the ills of it. I think that would have been a much better play. It would have been much clearer. You cannot make friends with socialists.
Yeah.
And Sean, isn't it interesting that the very people that claim that Donald Trump is this monster, this dictator, they're begging him to act like the most authoritarian dictator you've ever seen?
That's because we let communists call themselves liberals. The entire time they have been fascists, Marxists, and communists. They're not liberals. If you believe in the Constitution, if you believe in liberty, you're the liberal. I'm the liberal, not them.
Good job. But I believe that's really what President Trump did. He allowed the states to control and do, because guess what? Governors get elected to lead. That's what they get elected to do. They don't get elected to become dictators, but they do get elected to lead. And I think I think Charlie was saying that down in Florida, down in Georgia, you see real leadership on display. I do have those type of people calling in saying, to the ones that want to have the discussion, I'll have the discussion. Because when you actually take and watch the timeline and go through, and I've changed so many minds by actually showing them the timeline of what actually transpired during this COVID crisis. But, those idiots, that don't want to listen, that no matter what you say, they're not going to believe you anyway.
The question that I ask, I guess, to shut people down on this is, how does this end for you? How does it end? Where's the off-ramp? How do you see this ending? And they can't answer it because they know there isn't an answer. There is no answer to how does this end.
You know something, Chris? You can't get time back. You can't get time back. We look at the time we've lost. How many people buried their parents without seeing them? Or their kids? How many birthday parties without your family around? Who the hell are these people to tell us anything? Shut your mouth and sit in the office I let you pretend you work at. Sorry.
That first part sounded like he was running for office.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, even in Illinois, which is perhaps the most docile and compliant population of any of the 50 states, there was a bit of a revolt afoot over the last week against the second lockdown. You have story after story now of restaurant clusters that are staying open, community by community. You have mayors saying we're not enforcing the governor's diktat in Elmhurst, in Libertyville.
His what?
In Elmhurst, in Libertyville, in Orland Park. And so what does that say? I mean, especially take the Illinois example of a population that is loath to revolt against the established order, and that revolt is started this week. And what does that tell you?
The people are tired. The people are fed up, to Sean's point. They're tired of the fascism. People want to live their lives. They're losing everything. And now is the time to just say, I saw that you took part of that too, Dan, the revolt at one of the restaurants. But that's what Tom DeVore is a real good friend of mine, the lawyer that pretty much started all of this, the lawsuit against Pritzker and these things. And he's telling people, open up. If you have a brick and mortar, open up your business, force them. Now, I'm a former legislator, and I'm a former cop. I see nothing within the law, because basically what they're saying, they're applying rules to basically saying you're violating a rule, not a law. There's nothing that the police can do to you. Seriously, there's an actual verbiage in the language. There's a process. They have to first find a case of COVID at your place of establishment. Then I think it's 48 hours, the Illinois Department or that local health department has to then take you to court. Once they go and get the court order, and shut you down, they have to compensate you. People are forgetting this aspect apart. Read the verbiage. It's in the Illinois Department of Health regulations, and nobody's doing this.
You see, this is an important point. One of the things that keeps people afraid is I can't afford to lose my liquor license, I can't afford to lose my gaming license, the public health department, the cops. But understand, you still have due process rights.
Yes.
So they can come in and then you litigate that. I would encourage people to litigate proactively, preemptively to get injunctive relief. Yes. But even if they come, you still have due process rights, and you can litigate it just like you can litigate anything else. Right. And so maybe that will encourage more people, in addition to even the IHSA, Illinois High School Association, defying the governor's order with respect to starting basketball for the kids. I mean, those are all like important, maybe small, but important small acts of defiance that add up to perhaps a real wave of defiance, and it's long overdue, I would say.
Plus, you get to yell at a state worker. Get the hell out of my office, you Gestapo son of a gun. Yeah. I love that stuff. Are you kidding me? As one of the few guys up here that's been arrested, you can't get arrested for this.
Yeah.
So it's great.
Ice Cube, people.
Thank you.
I might see you at the bar later, and we'll see what we can do about that.
Hey, Sean, you're White Cube now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
White cube.
I'll say...
minus the rhythm.
Oh, I can dance.
Here's how I kiss up to the locals a little bit. My wife's from Arlington Heights.
Oh.
My in-laws own my father-in-law sadly passed away back in October, and I'm glad. For his sake, I'm glad that it happened only because knowing him and my mother-in-law, who both own a hobby shop in Des Plaines. Any Des Plaines people around here? A couple of you. But I remember that my father-in-law, before he died last year, he would say to me, Chris, we've been blessed over all these years to earn a living off of people's disposable incomes. We're in the hobby business. We literally, if people don't have
Soviet Union doesn't have a hobby business.
That's right.
Yeah.
And 9/11, I remember well because his store's not far from O'Hare, and they would get a lot of traffic. Pretty well-known hobby shop for his size all these years, people coming in. Well, 9/11, everything stopped, and that was a terrible time. They let go of all their employees, and it Des Plaines, I believe, if memory serves, my mother-in-law, who's still running the store, I think for a time they had to close. And then and my mother-in-law, God bless her, she's an Irish Catholic Democrat, big Irish Catholic Democrat family, the old school Democrats, not the current crazy batch.
We call them Republicans.
There you go. That's exactly right. And I just feel like my father-in-law's lasting legacy is he left his wife now with this mess, and I can't help but think he's smiling now as she has just completely revolted and opened that store some time ago and told customers, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, come the hell in, come on in, let's just do it. She just feels at this point in their lives they've made it too far to put up with this now.
So, Chris, you sort of spoke about it, but let's develop that a bit more. All three of you have children. And so what are you hearing, seeing, feeling from your children in terms of their experiences, whether they're in school or not in school or sometimes in school? What does that tell you about what's happening in your kids' school communities and in the larger communities in which you live?
Me? You might as well get the worst one out of the way first. I told my kids from the time they were young, I always had a problem with people that would tell kids, don't judge. Don't use your judgment. Respect people. Listen before you speak after you listen. Always show respect. I never did that. I'm very proud of that. Yeah. I raised two gangsters.
That comes across.
Two gangsters. I really did. I dropped them off. I said, if you don't like what they're saying, ask them about it. You don't have to respect anybody. And always use your judgment. Always. If it's not right, it's not right. So I'm pleasantly surprised. I have one in Nebraska, and she thinks it's moronic and ridiculous, and she's spiteful. I'm very proud of her. I have another one who's a little timid. She doesn't say anything, but she knows how ridiculous it is. Yeah. And she said something that was never real political. I never wanted to brainwash him. She said, how bad is it going to be if Joe Biden wins? And I said, it'll never be the same. So you got a lot riding on this, kid. I'll always do what I can for you, but your future and the trajectory will never be the same. Kids need to be aware of that. That's my opinion.
Sean is sort of the Dr. Spock of the COVID era. Yeah. Sean Thompson, parenting tip, tell your kids don't respect anybody.
Right, and I drop them all off
and
at
judge
school.
them.
Every day I would drop them off. And the last thing I would say to them is, don't believe a word these idiots tell you. Every day.
Exactly, right. Yeah, science. Right. So a lot of people have problems getting reinforcement at the schools for what they're teaching at home. It's the opposite.
But in the meantime, who was right?
And you wonder why the teachers' unions hate we talk show hosts.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Exactly.
John?
I think from an emotional standpoint, I have a 7-year-old girl and my college-age girl. But my 7-year-old girl, when she was, because it's virtual learning, and she couldn't get it right. It was like the worst thing that ever happened to her. And she would cry. She still cries because she hates this virtual learning. And these schools, think about this. These schools they forced us and told us, we're coming into your homes, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, I'm grateful that Monday and Tuesday now, sorry, Amy, they're back to school for 4 hours. And then Wednesday through Friday, it's online all day. So it's been a real emotional drain, especially for my 7-year-old daughter.
And Chris, too, you mentioned your wife's a former school teacher, too. It's really interesting. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of this in terms of people's appreciation for exactly how these schools run, exactly who's running them. And it just seems like an opportunity for us nationally to rethink K-12 education, to rethink loyalty to the teachers' unions just because you like your kid's teacher. It seems like there's a lot of thinking a second time happening. I hope there is, at least.
I've never been in more serious discussion. If my kids are 6th grade, freshman in high school, sophomore in high school. And had they not gotten so far along with friends and in a really great school heretofore, we have still had very serious conversations about perhaps we've got to extract them just to save their lives. And when I say save their lives, I kind of am not exaggerating.
No.
It is as sad and depressing and excruciating. I can't, and I'm trying not to sound like I'm, quitting here or crying in my beer, but I can't remember a time in my life as a father that has been more challenging so far, and I know others have had worse, but this has just been awful. And to try to look at your kids and convince them that this is normal, or we can get through this, they know you're full of it. They need Sean. Uncle Sean needs to come over.
I'll straighten them out.
And but I'll tell you, if I can be honest, kind of like what you said. My middle son, who's a pretty industrious kid, he's been the toughest of the three through this. My oldest didn't do so well. My youngest hasn't done too well, but my middle kid figured it out. Until one day, he really melted down. He's taking an advanced French course, for heaven's sakes, and trying to do it online. And he finally just said, I'm so frustrated, Mom, I can't do it. And she reached out to the teacher, and the teacher said, well, I don't understand it because Drew has an A. In fact, he's the best student in our class. And my wife said, Drew, how is this? How are you the best student in the class and you're having such a terrible time? Damned if he didn't. He's figured out a way to go online and convert English to French through the internet and submits
Google
it.
Translate.
He's just flat-ass cheating.
Google Translate.
Evil Google.
He's just flatly cheating.
That kid's going to be a multimillionaire.
I know. And I said, son, I've never been more proud of you in my life.
Silver lining. Silver lining. Yeah.
So maybe not. Maybe a big tech's not all bad, right? It's not.
Right.
And so, speaking of big tech, it seems to me that a lot of conservatives, perhaps second to the Durham investigation and the inability to hold people who were responsible for the attempted coup accountable for what they did, that maybe the second greatest disappointment of the last 4 years has been the inability to do anything really material with respect to the big tech companies, their power to amplify what the DC press corps puts out. And I think that's an underappreciated. There's a lot of complaints about CNN and the DC press corps, but they wouldn't have the influence they have without the amplification from big tech. And we had another hearing this past week with more speechifying, and it was all well and good in the wake of how Twitter and Facebook handled the New York Post articles on Hunter Biden. But I just wonder, what you think about big tech and your conversations with listeners again, and where you would like the president to go in his second term with respect to big tech.
This is a pet peeve of mine because we're caught flat-footed. That's the real issue. You should have been way in front of this. Free market solves all this. You don't like Twitter, use another one. If you don't like Facebook, use another one. You remember I talked to you, we can tell them I talked to you off camera here.
It's not something I'm proud of.
After Barack Obama was elected, I lost my damn mind because I knew what an Alinsky-like son of a dog he was. Con man. So I started something. I wanted to cut these socialists out of my life forever. And I started something called the Capitalist Union. And it really got no steam. And I understand that. It didn't have the money. There was no real new technology. I was basically doing what your son did. I mirrored everything Facebook did and Twitter and just redid it under my own name. But the reality is it can be done. And if you don't like these companies, then come together as a group and buy the son of a dogs. That's the real answer, right? They don't have a monopoly. The only monopoly that can ever exist is if government allows it and licenses it. That's it. The reality is most of us were lazy. The conservatives, the Republicans, we just were told what to do rather than thinking of how to do it. Mark Zuckerberg stole the idea. It's not even his idea. If you don't like it, create another one. That's always the answer. Now, in the meantime, unfortunately, these rules are in place that it's too late, too little, too late now. But there will be a November 4th. That's when you have to do something.
Well, what do you think, Chris? I mean, Josh Hawley and some other Senate Republicans seem intent on going down the road to removing Section 230 immunity. There's other discussions about just forcing more transparency, things like Google search algorithms. Where are you?
Here's what I agree with Sean, but I would add one caveat. Look, we all, as broadcasters, anybody that's in print, anybody that's on television, we're held to a pretty strict standard by the federal government. I mean, we're regulated. We live under some
FCC,
laws,
right.
FCC. I mean, we can't just do anything we like. The federal government tells us some things that we got to do. I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but I will say if Google or Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, those of us in broadcasting, for instance, we use these platforms in some cases to monetize and make money, and others do too. And when they indiscriminately rip these things down, as Dennis Prager has said so brilliantly, they become editors. They are no longer the internet. They are now editors. And as such, if they're going to operate like an editor, then they need to be subject to the same laws that editors are. We need to be able to sue their asses. I want to sue them. We need to be able to take them to court. And if we can do that, then I'm 100% with Sean. Then let the free market have at it.
John?
I'm with Ted Cruz. They've become an arm of the Democrat Party. I've been posting all type of Trump stuff for the last 2-3 years, and even on Black and Right, at Black and Right Radio, shameless plug. I've been banned from posting. It's frustrating. It's literally frustrating that you can't go on there and report what your opinion about something. They completely shut down. Look at what happened with the whole Hunter Biden issue. I went and saw I got some friends who probably shouldn't say that loud, being in law enforcement, but I saw it. It's some very incriminating stuff on this. And they immediately shut it down, but Trump taxes paying $750 stayed up there for 2 weeks. Think about that. And to your point, Sean, we do need to create or buy it.
Absolutely.
That's how we
Your
change the game. That's how we change the game.
You don't want to turn to your abuser for help.
No.
So be careful what you ask the government for, and be careful when they say okay, because all they're going to do, they're not going to give you freedom. They're not going to give you opportunity. They're going to make it harder for us. So don't turn to your abuser.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a fair point that's raised here. I mean, I was talking to William Jacobson, who's legal insurrection. He's a Cornell law professor who does a legal insurrection blog. And he said, one of the things you have to understand is if you start tinkering with Section 230 in the Communications Decency Act, then it implicates us conservative media outlets too, conservative blogs. So now I could potentially be held to account in terms of legal exposure for what somebody posts in the comments section to something I post. And so, you don't want to replace the judgment of the big tech CEOs with the judgment of government. So you need to be thoughtful about this when it comes to big tech.
For instance, I don't know if this has come up on your station, and Joe Biden is spending just unbelievable, obscene amounts of money everywhere. Anywhere they can find it, they're spending it. Our radio station, our stream in Philadelphia, I don't know about you guys, but I mean, it's just wallpapered with it. And my listeners are calling me saying, what are you doing airing all these Biden ads? And so it's gotten to the point where I've had to explain. We can't, legally, by federal law, we can't say no. Like if Joe Biden comes to our radio station and says, we're going to buy ads on your station, we're going to air them to your audience, we can't say no. I don't know how many of you know that, but that's a law. Now, that's not true if Donald Trump wants to buy an ad on YouTube.
Or CNN.
Or CNN. Yeah. Now, that's a problem. I don't know what the equalizer is on that, but that is a real problem.
The equalizer is that we continue to win. That's the great equalizer. We need to win campaigns in a lot of these different states and cities and locales. That's how you change it. You give to candidates. You help them. That's how we change it. Until then, we're going to still sit on our hands and continue to take it from the government. Listen, the government, they'll do whatever you let them. Whatever you let them. They are so afraid of you. Trust me, as somebody I know, they hate those calls. They hate you showing up at their office. But that's what you have to do. They are literally scared. I'm telling you, they are really afraid of you. Especially these Illinois Democrats. Those Illinois Democrats who haven't had an opponent in decades, put somebody up against them and see what happens.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I mean, I think that's right in terms of the greatest vindication being victory, because think about all that is aligned against Trump and down ballot too, Republicans controlling the Senate. Think about all that's aligned. The left controls all the cultural and civic institutions. They have the amplifiers like have never existed in human history with big tech. And if the American people send Donald Trump back to the White House, I mean, that will put them in a tailspin. And so to that point, as we're short on time, I mean, give us, each of you, give me your predictions for what you see happening on Tuesday and how you see playing out.
We are so lucky that they picked Joe Biden to run against Donald Trump. He is the most unlikable, delusional, 80-year-old diaper-wearing fraud that they could have picked. It's a blessing in disguise. And this scandal that just hit, it's the real deal. He's been a political whore his entire career, and now we got him with the drug addict's son. Perfect. I think we win.
I'll go. I'll give you.
John?
I'll give you the close. I'll give you the close. How do you follow that up, though?
You can't.
I don't-
You just say what he says and leave.
Guess
Just
what?
followed up sanely. Yeah.
I really believe we'll know in a couple of days that Donald John Trump would have won in a landslide. I believe that with every
Landslide.
fiber that's in me.
Landslide.
Yeah.
All right.
I think America and Americans will not give up on this country.
You know what? I've not said this anywhere else because I've been too afraid to.
But you're up here with Sean.
But I'm up here with Sean, and he's got my back. I agree with John completely. I've been saying on the show for a while now that I don't think whoever wins this, I don't think it's going to be close. I've been saying it to hedge my bets because, quite frankly, I've been embarrassed by Mitt Romney in Pennsylvania, and I swore I'd never open my mouth about a prediction again. But I agree with you, and I'm going to say it here today for the first time. I don't think it's going to be close. I don't think we're waiting till December in the Supreme Court. I think it's a blowout runaway win.
All right.
I do.
All right.
What about you, Prof?
I'm just a moderator. So
Never trust a guy with a hanky in his pocket.
that's exactly right.
Hey, Sean.
You're right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. So then let's start planning the second-term agenda, since this is a fait accompli. What's the biggest disappointment you had from term one that you want Trump to immediately correct in term two?
I want him to free up the free market a little bit more. I don't like Peter Navarro. I think he's a shady Democrat rat. And I don't like the borrowing and debt. I can't stand that Liza Minnelli. He walks around with Steve Mnuchin. I want those two bums out of there.
All right. Steve Mnuchin, Peter Navarro, first to the guillotine in the second term. All right. John?
I want him to fire Christopher Wray.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Big disappointment.
Now I'm just picturing Steve Mnuchin in Cabaret.
Yeah. The role he was born to play.
You're right. I'm with John. Those rat bastards at DOJ need to be gutted. Every one of them. We've got to get that DOJ gutted. It has to happen.
All right. Thanks to each of our panelists, John Anthony, Chris Stigall, Sean Thompson.
And Dan Prof.